The morning I noticed the pills looked different. I almost convinced myself it was just the lighting, almost. But being a pharmacist means I don't just trust my eyes, I trust my memory, my gut, and the tiny printed details most people overlook. The prenatal vitamins I'd been taking for weeks were oval, light yellow, and smooth. The ones I pulled from the bottle that morning? Slightly chalkier. A different shade, more rounded edges. I held one up to the light, turning it between my fingers. That's when Mark walked into the kitchen, coffee in hand, already dressed for work. "I think these vitamins are wrong," I said, holding the bottle toward him. He frowned, took it, flipped it around like a wine label, then shrugged. "Same brand, right? You probably just got a new batch." "No," I said softly. "I didn't reorder yet." He paused for a second, then smiled, too casually. "Maybe they sent a newer version. I'm sure it's fine." I didn't push. I just nodded. But inside, something shifted. I'd known Mark for nearly a decade. He wasn't the type to lie, not directly. But when it came to his mother, Judith, he had a way of brushing things aside, of explaining things away. Judith had never liked not being in control. And lately, it seemed like she was everywhere. She'd started showing up at our house with little suggestions, a bag of raw beetroot juice because she read somewhere it helped fetal brain development. Protein powders, essential oil kits. Once, she dropped off an entire crate of herbal teas labeled for strong womb energy. I smiled, I thanked her, I tucked them away, but I never drank them. And yet, every time she came over, she'd mention my health, my size, my lack of glow, my thin frame. "I just want to make sure this baby is strong," she'd say, always with a soft voice that dripped like syrup. "You're so modern, Sarah. Sometimes that means forgetting the old ways that worked for generations." And then her hand would rest on my belly a second too long. I started keeping the vitamin bottle in the locked cabinet under the sink. That day, I felt fine, physically. But inside, I couldn't shake the thought. Someone had switched them. And if that was true, I needed to know exactly who. Because I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a mother now, and something told me someone had crossed a line. That evening, after Mark went to bed, I pulled the vitamin bottle out of the trash. I had swapped it earlier that day, pretending to toss it after realizing it was expired. What I'd really done was slide it into a Ziploc bag, label it with the date, and place it in the back of my office drawer beneath a folder of old licensing CEUs. Now I took it out and examined the pills under my desk lamp. They weren't prenatal. They weren't even close. They were iron supplements, standard OTC. Not dangerous on their own, but completely different from what I was prescribed. No folic acid, no DHA, nothing tailored to pregnancy. Just a basic, generic iron tablet, completely mismatched from what I had carefully researched and chosen with my OB. And I knew for a fact I hadn't ordered them. Someone else had. And there were only two other people with regular access to our home, Mark and his mother. Mark wouldn't even know what to buy if he tried. Judith, on the other hand, had always been helpful, always bringing things, offering to top off my pill organizer when I was resting, making me cups of tea and insisting I sit while she tidied up the kitchen. She knew exactly what she was doing, and now I needed proof. I didn't want a confrontation. Not yet. I wanted something undeniable. Because I knew how it would go otherwise. Mark calling me hormonal, Judith crying into tissues, me looking like the one stirring up drama while pregnant. So the next morning, I ordered a discreet nanny cam, just a little white plug-in device with a wide-angle lens and motion detection. I hid it behind a box of decaf K-cups on the kitchen counter, angled directly toward the cabinet where I kept my medications. Then I waited. 3 days later, Judith dropped by to bring chicken soup. She kissed me on the cheek, told me I looked pale, and set to work in the kitchen while I feigned exhaustion and stayed on the couch. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I opened the camera app on my phone. There she was. Judith standing at the counter, opening my pill cabinet, unscrewing the vitamin bottle cap. She took out something from her purse, another bottle. Swiftly, carefully, she replaced a few tablets, then closed it like she'd done it 1,000 times. She didn't even look nervous. She looked satisfied. I sat in silence for a long time after watching the clip. Not crying, not shaking. Just steady. Because now I had more than suspicion. I had evidence. And something told me Judith wasn't done yet. The days leading up to the baby shower felt like walking on a tightrope with a smile painted on. Judith called nearly every evening to confirm another detail: floral arrangements, color themes, a special gift for the baby. She insisted on hosting the event at a local garden venue she'd already paid for, complete with an herbal tea station that she emphasized was just for Sarah. Mark, ever the dutiful son, seemed thrilled by her involvement. "She's excited to be a grandmother," he said, rubbing my shoulder. "Try to give her some grace." Grace. That was what they always expected from women like me. Grace under pressure, grace under suspicion, grace while someone tampers with your vitamins in the kitchen they don't live in. But I gave her something better. I gave her a chance to out herself. The morning of the shower, I packed a small clutch with two things: a flash drive containing the kitchen camera footage and a fresh memory card for my phone's voice recorder app. I wore a long ivory maternity dress, the one Judith insisted I'd look radiant in, and practiced my polite nod in the mirror. The venue was lovely, I'll give her that. White linen tables, pastel balloons, string quartet near the koi pond. Judith floated through the space like a hostess on a lifestyle channel. I spotted friends from work, cousins, neighbors, even Mark's colleagues, many of whom I'd never met. I made small talk, posed for pictures, smiled as someone gifted me yet another onesie that said, "Mom, it ain't easy." Then I saw her, coming toward me with a delicate porcelain teacup balanced carefully in both hands. Steam curled up like a warning. "I made this blend myself," she said softly. "Chamomile, fennel, just a pinch of senna. Cleanse the system, promotes good digestion." I froze. Senna, a known herbal laxative, powerful if you don't measure it properly, definitely not recommended for pregnant women. My stomach turned, but not from the pregnancy. "Thank you," I said sweetly, accepting the cup. She beamed, turned her back to greet someone behind her. That was my cue. I stepped aside, walked slowly toward the gift table, and pretended to examine a blanket someone had knitted. Then, just as Judith started laughing with an aunt near the fountain, I switched cups. The one she had poured for herself, sitting untouched on the silver tea tray. I carried mine back and placed it neatly beside my chair, and waited. 10 minutes later, Judith stopped mid-conversation and blinked, visibly pale. She excused herself quickly and disappeared inside the venue. Another 10 minutes. Then another. My best friend Emily, who happens to be a nurse, leaned over. "You see her face?" She whispered. "That looked like someone who took too much senna on an empty stomach." I sipped from a water bottle and nodded. "She gave you that tea?" Emily asked. I met her eyes. She tried. Judith didn't return for nearly 45 minutes. When she finally did, her complexion was clammy, and her carefully applied makeup had faded under the weight of whatever she'd just endured behind closed doors. She offered a weak smile, waved off questions from concerned guests, and muttered something about heat stroke and needing to lie down. I didn't follow her. I let her stew in the quiet panic of her own making. After the party, when most guests had left and the staff was clearing plates, I found her sitting alone near the rose trellis, sipping water and dabbing her forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. She looked up at me, tired and guarded. I sat down beside her. "Judith," I said gently, "we need to talk. Alone." Her eyes flicked around, checking to see who was watching. No one was. I reached into my purse and placed my phone face down on the table, the screen glowing softly for a second. Recording. "I want to ask you something," I said, keeping my voice even. "What did you put in my vitamins?" She flinched. "I saw the pills," I continued. "They weren't mine, and I saw the video, from the kitchen. You switched them." Her mouth opened, but no words came. I leaned closer. "And that tea you brought today, did you drink it?" She blinked. "What?" "The tea," I said. "Did you drink your own cup, or mine?" Her expression shifted, confused at first, then calculating. Then, fear. I waited, and that's when it broke. She pressed the handkerchief to her lips and whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was worried. You've been so thin and your appetite." "You gave me laxatives, Judith." Her hand dropped. "I thought maybe clearing your system a little would help the baby absorb more. It's an old remedy. It's what my grandmother used." "Judith," I said, "I'm a pharmacist. You're not just wrong, you're dangerous." Her eyes welled. "I didn't want to go to Mark about it. He thinks you're handling everything fine, but I've seen how tired you look, how pale. And so you drugged me." She covered her mouth with trembling fingers. I never wanted to hurt the baby, she said, voice cracking. I just wanted to help. I thought you weren't doing enough. The worst part? She believed that. She really thought that love justified what she'd done. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just reached over, stopped the recording, and stood up. You're not to come near me again, or this baby. She stood too, shaky and defensive. Sarah, please, we're family. No, I said. We're not. You crossed the line, and I have it on tape. You need to leave. She blinked, realizing I meant the garden, the event, my life, and then she did. Wordlessly, slowly, she got in her car and drove away. And I stood in the middle of that rose garden, one hand on my belly, the other holding a phone full of proof. She thought I was too soft to stand up for myself. She forgot I'm a mother now, and I record everything. That night, after Mark had finished brushing his teeth and crawled into bed beside me, I told him we needed to talk. He sighed. Not out of impatience exactly, but the way someone does when they know a conversation is coming that will be uncomfortable and unavoidably real. He leaned back against the headboard, folding his arms like a man bracing for a minor argument. Not an earthquake. I didn't waste time. I opened the voice memo app, tapped play, and placed the phone between us. Judith's voice filled the room. I didn't want to hurt the baby. I just thought Sarah wasn't doing enough. I only swapped a few vitamins. And the tea, it's what my grandmother used. Mark sat up straight, his jaw tightening. He listened, silent, as the words played back with horrifying clarity. Her rationalizations, her tears, her conviction that she was helping. By the time the recording ended, his face had gone pale. She actually did this? He said, barely above a whisper. She's been doing it for weeks, I replied. And I've got video footage, too, of her in our kitchen, swapping pills. He didn't say anything. I waited. You didn't believe me when I said the pills looked different, I added. I thought you were just stressed, he murmured, ashamed. And now? He looked down. Now I believe everything. We sat in silence for a long time. Then he looked at me, not with pity or defensiveness, but with something more rare in a man raised to protect his mother above all else. Reckoning. What do you want to do? He asked finally. I want her gone, I said. Not just from the house, from this pregnancy. From our lives. At least until she gets help. Mark nodded. The next morning, we met with a family attorney and started the paperwork for a temporary restraining order. Mark called Judith himself, voice shaking but firm, and told her not to come near the house, the hospital, or me. That until further notice, all communication would go through a lawyer. She didn't protest. Not this time. Maybe because she finally understood how serious this was. Or maybe because, for the first time in her life, she realized that we weren't going to protect her from the consequences of her own behavior. That week, I notified my OB, the hospital, and even our birthing center. Security protocols were updated. Judith's name was flagged at the front desk. A note in my file made it clear. No admittance. No exceptions. It was over. Not the pregnancy, not the anxiety, but the illusion that I was powerless. Judith had tried to control my body through the back door of concern. She forgot that she was dealing with someone trained in dosage, pattern, and evidence. She forgot that I had a child to protect now, and I would never let anyone harm her, not even family. 3 months later, my daughter was born on a rainy morning in April. The world outside was gray and soft, but inside the delivery room, everything pulsed with warmth and purpose. The nurses moved with quiet efficiency. My doctor, who had known about the Judith situation from the beginning, greeted me like an old ally before gloving up. Mark held my hand the entire time, eyes glassy, jaw clenched, not from fear, but from something else. Awe. She arrived just after 8 a.m., with a full head of dark hair and lungs that did not wait for permission. They placed her on my chest, and I cried, not out of pain, not even out of relief, but out of something deeper. Something elemental. I was a mother now. Officially, completely, undeniably. Judith wasn't there. She wasn't pacing the hallway or peeking through glass. She wasn't waiting with flowers and unsolicited herbal tea. She didn't know the name we'd chosen. And she wouldn't be told, not until we decided it was safe. It felt right. Not cruel. Not vindictive. Just clean. Before we were discharged, the hospital's security director came by. He double-checked my file, confirmed the restraining order, and gave me a number to call if anything ever felt off during future visits. "We don't mess around with this stuff," he said. "Not when it comes to new moms." And for the first time since I'd peed on that test and saw 2 pink lines, I believed someone besides me really understood the stakes. We brought her home in the rain. I wrapped her in the soft green blanket my sister had crocheted, not the one Judith had sent, just in case, the week before the restraining order went through. That one stayed in a box in the back of the closet. Untouched, the house felt quiet in the best possible way. No interference, no tension, just lullabies on low volume and the sound of our lives realigning around a 6-pound miracle with her father's eyebrows and my temperament. At night, while feeding her in the glow of the moonlight filtering through the nursery window, I'd think back to everything that had happened. The pills, the tea, the manipulation wrapped in faux maternal concern. And I would whisper into her tiny ear, "You will never be guilted into silence. You will never be told to shrink for someone else's comfort. You will never be punished for trusting your own instincts." Because I'd already learned those lessons for her. And now, she could grow in a world where her mother wasn't afraid to say, "This is mine, my body, my child, my boundary." Judith didn't just try to interfere, she tried to plant fear. But I gave birth to fire. A year passed, 12 months of soft milestones and sharp awakenings. First smiles, first words, first steps. And in between, small, defiant joys. Rocking her to sleep while sipping coffee, I made exactly how I liked it, not how someone told me I should drink it for the baby. Laughing during tummy time, without having to explain why I wasn't following some outdated grandmother-approved routine. Judith tried reaching out twice. The first time was a card. No apology. Just a photo of a pink baby sweater and a line that read, "I hope she's healthy." I didn't respond. The second time was more direct. A voicemail left on Mark's old number. Tearful, nostalgic, carefully worded to avoid direct accountability. Just layers of guilt and longing stacked like sugar cubes dissolving in regret. We saved the message but never returned the call. Mark didn't fight me on it. Because he had seen the recording, he had read the reports. He had looked into the terrified eyes of his wife when the truth finally cracked open, and he hadn't looked away. Judith's absence was no longer a punishment, it was a boundary, enforced, honored, necessary. I didn't tell people the full story when they asked where my daughter's grandmother was. I just said, "She's not involved." If they pried, I'd add, "It's a safety thing." That usually shut it down. But sometimes, when I met another mother with tired eyes and a quiet tension behind her smile, I'd lean in and say something softer. "You're not crazy, and you're not alone." And almost every time, she'd breathe out like she hadn't in months. Because every woman who's ever been gaslit by someone smiling while they steal your autonomy knows the exact weight of silence. But I didn't carry that silence anymore. I carried my daughter. And she grew in a home where the rules were made by trust, not tradition. Where help meant respect, not control. Where being a mother meant leading from instinct, not submission. One afternoon while folding laundry, I came across the little white dress Judith had mailed before the baby shower. I hadn't touched it in over a year. It was still sealed in its dry cleaning bag, pristine, lace-trimmed, and covered in memories I didn't want. I held it for a moment. Then I walked to the trash, opened the lid, and dropped it in, gently, but without hesitation, because some things don't belong in your child's future, especially when they were stitched from someone else's control. And that's how I knew the story was done, not with revenge, but with a line drawn and kept. And that's how I learned. Sometimes protection doesn't look like a fight. It looks like a recording, a camera, a cup quietly switched at the right time. Ever had someone cross the line for your own good? Tell us in the comments, subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more true stories of quiet revenge, and send this to a mom who trusts her instincts, always.